The US and Britain are considering clemency for President Assad if he agrees to attend an international conference on political transition in Syria. British officials say the initiative came after London and Washington received encouragement from Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Let's now cross over to RT's Anissa Nawe, standing by in St. Petersburg with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. Anissa, over to you.
That's right. I do have Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov with me. I want to get straight to the questions because he's very pressed for time. British Prime Minister David Cameron says that in Los Cabos at the G20, President Putin has shifted his view on the situation in Syria. What can you say about that? Is that true?
It is not true. It is not true at all. The meetings with David Cameron and with President Obama did discuss Syria. Both our partners, the Americans and the British, were saying that President Assad must go, and then the external players must develop a transition plan for the Syrians to agree. We expressed our position that we cannot accept the policy which would be aimed at changing regimes from outside. This has been our position all along, and that we cannot prejudge for the Syrians what the outcome of the political dialogue would be. We strongly support the political dialogue. We strongly support the efforts to stop the violence, and we suggest that for this purpose all external players should lean on the Syrian party on which they have influence and thus persuade them to withdraw from the cities, both the government and the armed groups of the opposition, and to sit down and to have a dialogue, but without prejudging from outside what the substance and results of this dialogue might be. It's for the Syrians to decide. So I've seen the statement by Prime Minister Cameron that President Putin shifted his position after meetings in Los Cabos. It is not true at all.
All right. I want to get your opinion on these rumors.
I apologize. Actually, President Putin was asked in Los Cabos itself at his final press conference about his position on Syria, and he expressed it exactly the way he did with David Cameron and with Barack Obama.
Now, something that has shifted are these reports that we're hearing about clemency for Assad if he steps down from the West, some kind of immunity. How would Russia react to that?
I would just repeat what I said. It's for the Syrian people to decide who should rule them, how they would live. The main thing for the external players is to ensure that they all sit down at a negotiating table and develop the future for their country, where the minorities, majority, would feel safe and will feel included in the political system. Otherwise, the groups which now support President Assad, and there are quite a number of groups who do so, would become in the opposition to the ruling majority, and the war and violence would continue, but the positions of the participants would be shifted. This is not what we want for the Syrians. This is something which might happen if people insist on one-sided approaches to the crisis, and if people insist on imposing something on the Syrians.
Some would argue that that was the case in Libya, which I want to just ask you one quick question about. 100 people killed just this week alone. Obviously not what a lot of people thought they were fighting for, what the West thought it was getting involved in, how it would develop. But is that the same fate that Syria holds if there's some kind of intervention?
Well, it couldn't be the same, because there would be no resolution of the Security Council authorizing outside interference.
In terms of the aftermath of any kind of intervention, though, for the people?
Well, I think the intervention in Syria would be disastrous for the region. Syria is a multi-ethnic, multi-confessional country whose ethnic and confessional groups have very close relationship with sister groups in other countries. Lebanon has already been influenced by the Syrian developments. The inter-ethnic clashes and strife can take place very fast, and it can embrace the entire region. The Kurdish problem. The Kurds live in Syria, in Turkey, in some other countries, in Iraq. the problem of Christians. Christians in Egypt have already been subject to some violence, and it is very dangerous. They have been living there for centuries, and to topple this balance would be catastrophic.
The Western media this week talked about Russia sending warships to Syria, helicopters to Syria, and there was really sort of a media frenzy around it, even though it proved out in the end that the U.S. kind of backtracks on it. How do you react to that?
Well, it's part of the campaign, and not very decent campaign, I would say. We are sending no battleships to Syria. We have been saying publicly that we are implementing the contracts which we have to supply arms to Syria. Those armaments are entirely defensive, and they mostly consist of air defense systems, which cannot be used against population, which can only be used to respond to an outside aggression. The ship which is being discussed these days indeed was carrying air defense systems, and it was carrying 3 helicopters which have been repaired in Russia under the contract signed in 2008. Those are Soviet helicopters, and they have been in Syria from Soviet days. And in 2008 there was a contract to repair them. And this was done, and the helicopters were being shipped on board the vessel, and they are still to be assembled. You know, when they are delivered, they have to be assembled, and the entire process will take not less than 3 months. So to speak about something which we just sold to Syria and which is being used in action is not true at all. But this story has another twist, with the British insurance company deciding to withdraw the insurance from this particular ship. You know, it's a testimony that the insurance system of Great Britain is not reliable, because they were citing the sanctions imposed on Syria unilaterally by the European Union, which means that anyone, any country, any company of a country who is not violating any international rules, who is not violating any Security Council resolutions, might be subject to extraterritorial application of somebody else's unilateral sanctions. This is a very slippery slope, and I do believe that we have to discuss this issue of unilateral sanctions in a systemic manner. What they mean and what can be done, you know, to make sure that those who faithfully implement international law, including the resolutions of the Security Council, should not be subject to application of somebody else's rules. You know, the bad examples are contagious, and it was until recently the United States which was resorting to unilateral sanctions to punish countries every now and then, including sanctions with extraterritorial application. Now, unfortunately, the European Union is taking the clue and beginning to use sanctions in a unilateral manner more and more, including against Syria, but also in some other cases. It's a trend which is counterproductive. In principle, dealing with any international issue, you need to include partners with whom you have difficulties, not to isolate them. Isolation never works.
Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov commenting on the situation in Syria and confirming here in RT that statements by British Prime Minister David Cameron that Russia has shifted its position are clearly not the case. Back to you.
All right, Artis, there. Many thanks indeed.
Sure.